Hello, my name is Professor Keister, and I am here to discuss tonight chapters 1 and 2 of Corporate and Partnership Taxation. I think probably the best place to begin tonight's discussion is by discussing the various forms that business entities can take. There are essentially only three. There's the sole proprietorship, the partnership, and the corporation. Now, the sole proprietorship is pretty much a one-shot deal. There aren't any flavors or nuances or variations. Okay. Partnerships, on the other hand, there are 5 different forms that a partnership may take. And then corporations can take 2 forms, and we'll discuss each as we go through this evening's discussion. A sole proprietorship, one of the things you want to keep in mind about a sole proprietorship is that it's a pass-through entity. There is no separation, no legal separation, no division, no distinction between the type of business entity, the sole proprietorship, and the owner. They are one. Okay. Now, as you move through the various forms of business entity, you start to notice a gap. When you get into partnerships, there is a legally recognized gap between the business entity known as a partnership and the owners, the partners. And the same is true for corporations. But for a sole proprietorship, there is no distinction whatsoever. A sole proprietorship is known as a pass-through entity. And the reason why is because the sole proprietorship in and of itself does not pay taxes. The owner pays taxes on whatever net income is derived from the sole proprietorship's business operations. One of the dangerous things about a sole proprietorship is that there is a thing called unlimited liability. And what that means is whatever torts or malpractice acts, or acts of malpractice, that the business owner may commit, not only is the sole proprietorship liable, so is his or her personal assets. So if I'm a sole proprietorship, let's say I'm a landscaping business, and I go out and run over a kid with my riding mower, not only is the assets in the capital, are the assets in the capital of the proprietorship liable to litigation, basically being sued away, the sole proprietorship forced into liquidation, everything's sued away, okay? So are my personal assets, and that's a big thing. So is my 401k plan, my house, my car, my retirement property or vacation property, my boat, my wife's jewelry, okay? And I'll explain that in a little bit. Because a marriage is considered a general partnership, and I'll discuss this in a little bit. But what I'm trying to get at is there is unlimited liability and risk associated with a sole proprietorship. Now, the nice thing about a sole partnership is you call the shots. You don't have to clear your business decisions with anyone. So if you're like a control freak, sole proprietorship is a great way to go. But the risk is unlimited liability. Now, the next form of business entity we encounter is the partnership, and there are 5 forms of partnership. There's the general partnership, the limited partnership, the limited liability partnership, the limited liability limited partnership, and the limited liability company. Okay? Now, I wish I had a graphic for you, but what we're doing is we're moving along a line of liability. We're basically a graph. We're talking about a graph. We're along the x-axis is liability and the y-axis is control. So, for sole proprietorship, we are way out here. We are high control, high liability. Okay. The next form of business entity is called the partnership. Now the partnership, as I said, has 5 different forms. And what you notice, what's really happening here is the scope of liability is gradually, through the range of partnership forms, is being dialed down, made more precise until it's the actual tortfeasor that is being held accountable. Now, what am I babbling about? Okay. Partnerships. Let's start at the very beginning. General partnerships. General partnerships in a general partnership, all the partners are general partners. Okay? And the danger, this is probably the most dangerous form of partnership because everyone is personally liable for the actions of another partner. So let's say I've got a general partnership with 3 partners, A, B, and C. Let's say the general partnership is involved in technology. It's a technology company partnership. Partner A goes out on his own initiative, enters into a contract with Homeland Security to provide the technology services required for all Homeland Security offices throughout the world. Okay, and this is a little 3-person partnership. It's beyond the scope and capacity of the partnership. In a general partnership, one partner does not require the assent or consent of the other partners to enter into a binding contract. And it's not just a contract that binds the the partnership. It's a contract that binds the partners as well. So what I'm saying is, partner A has, on his own volition, entered into a contract with the Homeland Security. Okay? It's beyond the capacity of the partnership to meet. The federal government sues. The federal government receives a favorable disposition from the federal court that basically says the partnership is in breach of contract. The partnership must pay a tort remedy of $1 million. The partnership doesn't have that. Okay, so not only is the partnership liquidated and all the assets sold to meet that $1 million judgment, the government now looks at partner A, who got us in this mess. Okay? And they go after partner A's personal assets. So we're talking about partner A's cash, savings, investments, retirement accounts, house, cars, partner A's spouses or partners' jewelry, because as I said, a marriage is considered a general partnership. The inheritance that partner A received when his parents died, all of this is on the table, okay? And it gets worse. In a general partnership, all of the other general partners' personal assets are up for grabs too. That's the terrifying thing about a general partnership. One partner does something stupid, the other partners pay for it. Okay? And I can't tell you the number of times I've heard of these horrific stories about partner A going off and doing something, and partner B or partner C or X, Y, L, M, N, O, P, whatever, being wiped out. Okay. So the business community looked at this general partnership thing and said, man, that is a live hand grenade. We got to keep an eye on our partners all the time. This maybe isn't such a good idea. And so we came up with a new form of partnership called the limited partnership. Now, the limited partnership basically says, all right, we're going to segregate the partners up into two categories. General partners, who are involved in the day-to-day operations of the business and in making business decisions, and the limited partners. And the limited partners are really conceptually very similar to shareholders. They just put money into the partnership. They don't make decisions. They're not involved in day-to-day operations. They're out on the peripheral somewhere. Now, the liability associated with limited partnerships focuses down a little bit. Before, it was everybody is involved. You are all up against the wall. Now it's like, okay, only the general partners of the limited partnership have their personal assets at risk. Certainly, the entire partnership is vulnerable, but the personal assets of only the general partners are at risk. Okay, so that helps narrow the scope down. Then you've got the limited liability partnership, and you find these usually, and by the way, a limited partnership is usually found with, for some reason, real estate development partnerships. Okay, then you've got the limited liability partnership, the LLP. You find those generally with law firms, medical offices, and accounting firms. And what the LLP does is it takes this cone of immunity and puts it around all of the partners. And basically what it says is a partner's malfeasance is limited only to that partner. Okay, and that partner's personal assets. Now granted, the partnership is still vulnerable. All the capital that all the partners have put in is still vulnerable, but only the personal assets of the tortfeasor, the partner who committed the tort, is vulnerable. Okay. So again, you've narrowed the scope. Everybody up against the wall, just the general partners up against the wall, including the tortfeasor and the innocent. And now you're narrowing it down to just the tortfeasor. Okay. Then you have something called a limited liability, limited partnership, and that kind of goes back to the concept of the general partner, limited partner thing. Now remember how I said in the LP, you've got general partners and limited partners, and the general partners, all of them are vulnerable. The LLLP form says no, only the tortfeasing general partner is liable. So again, you've narrowed the scope of responsibility. Okay. And then you have the limited liability company. Now the neat thing about the limited liability company is even though it has company in its name, it really is a partnership. And the LLC form of business combines the pass-through benefits of a partnership with the with the limited liability exposure of a corporation. So what I'm saying is, for a limited liability company, nobody's personal assets are on the table. This is true for a corporation, for a C corporation, for example. You are limited only to the liability you are vulnerable to is limited strictly to the amount of money you've put into that corporation. That's true for an LLC. So let's say you've got a corporation. The corporation's been pumping toxins into the Severn River, and it's gotten into the water table, and it's been poisoning people in the village. The shareholders' personal interests, personal assets are not vulnerable. the worst thing that can happen is that the corporation is sued into liquidation. All of your capital investment is gone, but your personal assets are immune. Okay, that's the LLC. Okay, now you move on to the next form of business called the corporation. There are two types of corporations. There's the S Corp and the C Corp. Now, the S Corp is kind of a hybrid. It can be a corporation, it can be a partnership. It depends on how the owners set it up. And it can change, by the way. Now, maybe not from year to year, but it can morph occasionally. In some years it can be considered a partnership, some years it's a corporation. Depends on, it's just the state of the economic affairs. An S Corp, now there are some requirements to being an S Corp. You have to, well, let me put it this way. To be a C Corp corporation, you've got to have more than 100, let's see. No, let's back up. Let's look at it this way. To be an S Corp, you have to have less than 100 shareholders, none of whom can be foreign nationals. It has to be a domestic corporation. There's no, actually the interesting thing, there's no requirements as far as net income or assets are concerned. And there are a few other requirements, I can't remember what they are offhand. The thing about the S Corp is it allows the owners the opportunity to receive alleviation from double taxation. An S Corp, if you elect to be taxed as a partnership, enjoys pass-through taxation, meaning to say no taxes are paid by the corporation. Now, that doesn't mean the recipients of net income don't pay taxes. They do. Sole proprietorships, partnerships, owners of S corporations that are set up as a partnership pay the taxes of the net income after it's been allocated. Okay. C corporations are different. Now, C corporations, in exchange for the immunity that the owners receive, the government kind of feels, well, okay, you're going to have to give something up. And what they give up is double taxation. Well, they don't give it up, they get double taxation. A C corporation has to pay taxes on its net income, And then at the end of the year, when it's got this pool of funds called net income, it has to decide what it wants to do. Does it want to keep it in the form of retained earnings, or does it want to pay it out to the shareholders in the form of dividends, or does it want to do a mixture of both? If it pays out anything to dividends, meaning to say if the shareholders receive anything, the shareholder pays taxes also, so you get this double taxation concept going, okay? So those are the three predominant business entities. And like I said, if you were to look at a graph, and if you were to chart the graph at the intersect point between the X and Y axis as being, say the X axis is control, the Y axis is personal liability. At the very nexus of those 2 points would be corporations. Okay, and as you moved out across the graph, you would encounter sole proprietorships, and then the most vulnerable, and yet the one with the most control, is the sole proprietorship. Of course, you would go through the spectrum of partnerships. Now, why do corporations have the lowest form of control? Well, shareholders really don't have a whole lot of say in the corporation. Yeah, they get to vote. They get to vote for the board of directors, but they are not involved in day-to-day business operations. Okay. The next entity from the corporation would be the S corp, and when you start getting into partnerships, the LLC. Okay, because you've got more control, not a whole lot of liability. and then limited liability, limited partnership, general partnership, sole proprietorship. Okay? All right.